6, 2022 Governing Council meeting to order. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we will move to item 1.02, a roll call vote to establish quorum. Ms. Morrow Reel.
Thank you. Afton.
Kenny Edgar from Afton here.
Okay, Bayless.
Shannon Kohler for Bayless.
Brentwood.
Yes, this is Ryan Flynn from Brentwood.
Clayton. Clayton. Ferguson Florissant.
Here, Kevin Martin.
Hancock Place.
Here, Jennifer Kosman.
Hazelwood.
Kevin Langley, Hazelwood.
Jennings.
John Schler from Jennings.
Kirkwood.
Here, Chad Kavanaugh.
Ledoux. Go back.
Keisha Lee Ledoux, present.
Lindbergh.
Jen Miller, present.
Maplewood, Richmond Heights.
Rachel Goldsman, present.
Melville.
Patrick McKelvey, present.
I didn't hear who that is.
Patrick McKelvey.
Okay, I'm sorry. Normandy. Parkway.
Debbie Hopper, present. Parkway.
Pattonville. Pattonville. Gridner.
Ruth Greco, present.
Riverview Gardens, I'm here. Rockwood. Rockwood. University City.
Joanne Suda, present.
Valley Park. Valley Park. Webster Groves. Webster Groves. Trying to see if we have a quorum.
Yes, we have a quorum.
I'm just getting ready to say thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rita. And thank you, Ms. Morrow Reel. We will move on to item 2.01, approval of our agenda. Dr. Keenan, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, there is not.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved. Kenny Edgar.
Second, Riverview
Ledoux.
Gardens. Okay.
Any questions? Those in favor say aye.
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 Any against? Any abstentions? Motion approved. We'll move to item 3.01. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the March 7th, 2022 Governing Council meeting?
So moved, Keisha Lee Ledoux.
Second, Debbie Hopper, Parkway.
Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
against? Any abstentions? Motion approved. Item 4.01, public speakers. Public speakers are asked to submit comments prior to the meeting, which will be read during the meeting, and we do not have any tonight. We will go to 5.01 PAC updates, and I believe Dr. Kamisha Carter is here to give us that update.
Greetings and salutations. We would like to present to you our SSD Parent Advisory Council report for June 6, 2022. Next slide, please. I would like to introduce you for the last time, the last 2021-22 PAC. Next slide. Those executive committee members are Dr. Kamisha Carter, myself, President, Rob Eden, Vice President, Christina Blankenship, Recording Secretary, Bridget Wildshoes, Correspondence Secretary, and Parliamentary at this time is vacant. Next slide, please. The 2022-2023 PAC Executive Committee is Dr. Kamisha Carter, myself, President, Rob Eden, Vice President, Christina Blankenship, Recording Secretary, Monique Hines Smith, Corresponding Secretary, Latricia Clark, Education Supervisor, Parliamentarian. And I apologize. Kamisha Carter, Pattonville, Rob Eden, Ridner, Christina Blankenship, Clayton, Monique Hines Smith, Hazelwood, and Latricia Clark, Normandy. Our PAC findings for this year. Next slide. The goals of the PAC were at the beginning of the year that we reported to the governing council were, next slide, reaching out to our goal one, building the PAC, reaching out to the northernmost and southernmost districts with little to no representation, completed with contacting SSD directors through emails and phone calls. Next slide. Continue to reach out to families who are in partnering districts and SSD schools to begin, join, or reestablish a local PAC. We completed that goal with some success. We reestablished Pattonville, Ridner, Hazelwood, and Ferguson, Florissant. Next slide. Our goal 2, communication. Communicate effectively with parents in native language. We completed the major language of our SSD families is Spanish. So we have translated all of our outgoing documents in Spanish. Next slide. Goal 2, communication. Collaborate more effectively with SSD. It was completed. We have moved from an I got you approach to a more collaborative approach where all voices are heard and all voices are valued. Next slide, please. Collaborate more effectively with constituents, boards, and community. Completed with additional need. We have successfully communicated with the aforementioned groups, but more can be done. Next slide, please. Our goal 3, our documents, revision, updated and revised bylaws that is continually being in progress. Update and revised handbook that is also in progress. Update and revise new member handbook that is also in progress. Next slide. Partnering districts. Over the last year, we have noticed some things as the SSD PAC, and we also have some wonderings and some asks for you as partnering districts. Next slide, please. Our ask. Understand that our children belong to your district who receive services from SSD. We have been finding out for some of the districts that they consider our children SSD children, and that's not true. We are a part of your district. We pay taxes into your district, and we want our children to receive a free and appropriate education from your district, which also includes services from SSD. Next slide. Our acts. Abide by the partnership agreement and the assurance statement. In several of the districts that our children are in, they do not have adequate spacing. They are included in places where humans will not really live. I mean, we really want you to abide by what you sign. And that's the partnership agreement stating that you will make sure that while our children are in your care as taxpayers, as they are working with SSD, they will get a free and appropriate education. Next slide. Our ask. Train your superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals, assistant principals on fidelity issues and due process with students who receive special services. This is not happening. And as we have dug deeper, we are thoroughly appalled. We need you as the board, as you hired the superintendent, to make sure that he or she is working in fidelity to make sure that our students who are in your district first who receives SSD services have principals and assistant principals and people within the school district working together with SSD to make sure that our children are getting exactly what they need. Next slide. Our ask. Answer our call and communicate with the SSD PAC. We will be calling board presidents and superintendents this summer, starting in July. We are asking for you as partner districts to collaborate with your constituents. Next slide. We want to work with you. This is not I got you, you doing something wrong, we are about to sue or anything like that. That's not what this is. This is making sure that we have a voice at the table as a parent, making sure that you know that our children are a part of your district and that we pay taxes into your districts, and we want our children to receive the adequate, equitable education that they deserve from your district. Now the floor is open for questions.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, Ms. Hopper.
Hi. Well, again, thank you. I always appreciate you being at the table and giving us your report.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is, are there examples of the fidelity issues and due process with students that you might be able to provide to us? Just, you know.
As in a particular district, the parent raised calls as why her child was suspended. The child was suspended and never received paperwork, but it's documented that she's suspended. This child was dysregulated and was not given the adequate assistance from the outside, not from her case manager, but from outside general ed teacher, assistant principal, counselor, and things of that nature. So this escalated out of control. Example number 2. A child was apprehended by who was autistic and was scripting and was apprehended by the SRO and slammed down because the SRO thought that he was being a threat because he was scripting a World War II movie. And it was actually scripting. It wasn't saying I'm going to blow up the school. No, he was saying I'm going to blow up the Nazis or the Japs. So I'm going to blow up. This is D-Day. So this child was picked up, slammed down, and then carted off, which caused further trauma. One more example. A child was in a fight. A SSD student was in a fight, and it was recorded. And the teachers and the principal in this particular school watched the fight before they stopped the fight. This is appalling. This is not right. And we got to do something different. Because what happens? Let's talk about what happens. So the parent is disgruntled. And so the next step, she or he goes to the school district and she reports it. Nothing happens on that level. It escalates to the next level, and nothing happens on that level. It escalates to the board. Nothing happens on that level. Then now the board is facing a lawsuit because nothing has happened through the escalation. We don't want to go there. What we would like for you to do is communicate with your subordinates, your direct reports, and make sure that children are being treated fair and equitably. Knowing that a child who receives 10 days out of school suspension, who receives services, is now out of compliance. That you must talk to the case manager so that you guys can reconvene the IEP. There are so many legal issues, and it permeates from Public Law 94-142, the IDEA law, ADA laws. The IEP is a legal and binding document. And so I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
And so we are asking that y'all treat our children the same, with the same respect, understanding that they have additional needs. And they are not regular children. They are children with exceptionalities.
When a student with an IEP comes before a discipline hearing, or in Parkway's case, the board hears appeals for suspensions from parents. And in some cases, if a student has an IEP, should the case manager for that student always be present at all of the hearings that are taking place with that student if they have an IEP, would you say?
I would say yes, but I'm going to lend that question to someone who knows exactly who's supposed to be there, and that will either be Chief Pendergrass or Dr. Chiquita McRiddle if she's on the call.
Good afternoon. This is Chiquita McRiddle. In regards to any student who receives a suspension, it should be in accordance with the district's policy, their discipline policy, and the infractions therefore related to that specific incident. Students are able to be, in accordance with a district's policy, suspended generally in most instances 10 days and or less. Anything more than 10 days requires the approval of the superintendent for that particular suspension. With any suspension, with any disciplinary issue, whether that action that the student is being has been presented with, all students should have the opportunity of due process that allows the students to provide a statement in written, in most cases, and or orally, verbally, where they're able to have that information scribed for them if they're not able to write that information out. And that information should be reviewed by that school disciplinarian, that school administrator making those decisions for a suspension. Generally, with students with an IEP at the beginning of each year, we require that case managers provide that information to the school administrators so that they are informed of students and their diagnosis and any additional information that will support that particular student and or those students in the gen ed and or special ed settings, in all settings. And that basically is how discipline should be considered and or practiced in all school districts.
And just to add on what Ms. McRiddle has added, Ms. Hopper, what you would also want to do is have a conversation with your director, because it's important that we respect the procedures of each partner district and see what their procedures, who needs to be invited at that meeting. Where the case manager is very important is when you're considering anything that would be related to the student's disability, the manifestation determination, when we would have to review the behavior plan based on the decision that is made out of the hearing. If there is a discipline hearing, making sure the case manager is aware so we can promptly get the team to the table and consider all that value. It is done a little differently. The procedures should be the same, but I would definitely say that if there's any questions to that, that would best be answered by your director in each district.
And I was just going to ask, oh, I'm sorry, Debbie, were you finished with your questions? I didn't want to interrupt.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know who the director is for our school district, but I have never met the case manager. So that's interesting. That's something that I will make it a point to find out. And we do have some people that I'll be trying to make contact with you with Dr. Carter as far as representing Riverview Gardens. So I'll be reaching out to you. I don't know how to, I can shoot you an email, or maybe if you can share your email, your direct email, I can send it to Rita and she can get it to you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll do that. Okay.
And Ms. Morrill, a follow-up response to the statement that you just shared. Mm-hmm. Case managers can be that particular service provider. In most instances, it's the teacher that is providing those services. in my belief, I believe the directors and our special education coordinators, you and anyone at the district level should be familiar with those individuals who work directly with those case managers.
Thank you.
Okay.
I do have one more question. It's more of a legal question, perhaps. Are there certain discipline matters that automatically require an IEP reconvening to be done when a student with an IEP is disciplined? Is that if a student is disciplined or suspended? I'll take suspension right now. Does that automatically require reconvening of the IEP, especially if perhaps it was considered a manifestation, whether or not it was considered a manifestation?
If I'm understanding, no action would require an IEP team to come back together when you're considering discipline. There's not a particular in the code of conduct that, oh, this is the time that we would want to get the team together. Knowing students the best, the IEP team can get back together in any situation. What we base it on is that when we need to do a manifestation determination. So if there's a pattern of behavior that is happening and it results in longer than 10 days, the IEP team needs to get back by the 11th day to consider if the manifestation, if the disability is related to the incident itself or the behavior itself. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I was writing as you were talking. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I want to add to, coming from PAC, I have sat in on several IEPs as a parent advocate. And one of the things that we would love to see is some more participation from the districts, meaning there's principals, assistant principals, counselors in buildings. And I've had 2 IEPs that we have had to beg to have a principal, an assistant principal, a counselor, somebody attend that IEP meeting. And again, our students are from that district. So coming from Rittner, my child is a Rittner student, and to sit down at an IEP meeting and have no collaboration, no communication with anybody coming from that home district is kind of frustrating. And especially when we're talking some discipline issues, you're talking about schedules, because that district handles the schedule. So when the district's not sitting in an IEP and it's not working for a particular class, they're not there. And then as a parent, we're going back and fighting those battles down the road. So having somebody from the district be a part of those IEPs would be very beneficial.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Okay, Dr. Carter, I'll echo what Debbie said earlier. I appreciate you coming every quarter and giving us an update. It's very informative and helps us kind of know what's going on. And I appreciate that. We will move on to item 6, our superintendent reports. We have 4 this evening. Our first one is item 6.01, partnership agreement, that will be presented by Ms. Mack-Riddle.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Chiquita Mack-Riddle. I am the Chief Officer of Partner Districts, and tonight I will be presenting to you the partnership agreement updates. Next slide. Next slide. So what have we learned? The revised partnership agreement over the past 2 years have really helped us to increase knowledge and awareness of what our expectations are. We continuously use this tool to monitor progress, but also to help us plan in those categories that you see listed before you. How we support districts with staffing, the instructional delivery, collaboration with stakeholders, the programs and services that are offered, data and technology support, transportation needs for students, and also collaborating to discuss career technical education. And again, this document really helps us to guide those conversations with our partner district staff. Next slide. We've added some components to this partnership agreement to support what our asks have been from many stakeholders. And 2.8 really focuses on how we want to ensure that we are working hand in hand with partner districts and that we do have the opportunity for our administrators to be at the table with planning and developing goals, but to ensure that we have true collaboration, to ensure that we're capturing feedback from our superintendents as we provide services in each of our partner districts. So as we move into the 22-23 school year, one of the added components that we will have is the opportunity for us to work collaboratively with the superintendents and other members of the leadership team for us to review standards and indicators as it relates specifically to our administrator performance review. The performance review is an opportunity for our directors as well as our special education coordinators to really provide feedback themselves, but also for their direct reports to provide feedback through the evaluative process and to help us to guide conversations and to develop goals. One of the components that we have added to the partnership agreement moving forward is for us to really begin to have those conversations, which will include the voice of the superintendent providing feedback. This process will not be evaluative, but it will allow us to really begin to shed light on the work that we do from a special education perspective, how it's aligned to partner districts, and how it supports all students. Next slide. 2.9 really focuses on how we really work to ensure that we are engaging with our stakeholders and sharing information about our progress. And 2.9 will allow us to really work again with those superintendents in our partner districts, SSD's leadership, as well as other leadership team members in partner districts so that we develop goals in the areas of numeracy, literacy, and social emotional. This information will be a part of the future presentations that will be provided to school boards through the partnership agreement at the end of each year to provide the status and growth of each of those goals and how we have supported the district. And we want to ensure that we also include the engagement survey focus as areas, but focus areas, and develop goals in those areas because we want to ensure that we have positive school climates, regardless of if they are in our partner districts and or our SSD schools, but we also want to ensure that we are transparent and open with that information to help guide our partner districts with ensuring that we are collaborating and that we are creating those positive school climates as well. Next slide. Under category 3 in the partnership agreement, this is where the special education director and the coordinator will really begin to focus on being members of the parent advisory councils in partner districts. We want to ensure that they have an opportunity to be a part of those meetings that are taking place and activities and events that are taking place. We know that there are a few districts that we are still working to create those councils. But in those districts where they do exist, we want to ensure that our administrators are there, they are present, they are open to providing information and feedback to our families and also responding to their immediate questions and needs and concerns so that we don't have to wait for future meetings to occur at the district level with parent advisory councils, but really to have those partner district close and intimate meetings to take place and for us to be a part of those conversations and for our directors and coordinators to also be advocates and be an additional voice when working with those partner districts. Next slide. At the beginning and the end of the year, here are some of our important dates. As we close out this school year, June 30th is when we're asking for all of our 21-22 partnership agreements to be completed. And what does this mean? It means the director and the partner district liaison sitting down and having those conversations about the partnership agreement, taking a look at the rubric as well as the evaluation tool that is within that document to have conversation and to begin to prepare that conversation and feedback to share publicly with our stakeholders in each of our partner districts. We want to ensure that for the 22-23 school year, that the partnership agreements be presented to the board for signature. And at that time, that's when we want you to have the previous year's status, the growth status of how we ended that year and what the plans are for the upcoming school year. We want to ensure that that information is provided to Dr. Keenan's office no later than September 30th of this school year, the upcoming school year. And we also want to ensure that you have approved these items and they have been submitted no later than October 31st of next school year. Next slide. And if there are any questions, I can take those at this time.
The question that I have, Ms. Riddle, Mac Riddle, is so the SSD director should present this to, we should have them present this as a board item for discussion and action. And how soon would you recommend that we do this, considering the date that you would want this by?
And so we know that we will allow that at the discretion of each district. Many districts decide to do that different. In most instances, they do present this as an information item for discussion, information, and as well as discussion for the approval and the signature of the board president and the superintendent for that information to be submitted to Dr. Keenan's office.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Mackrell. I appreciate it. We will move on to item 6.02, a redistricting update. I believe that's Dr. Keenan.
Yes, it is. It'll be a brief update. So every census that we have to make sure that we look at our districting to make sure that we have all of our regional sub-districts to have similar amounts of population. So we just had a census and that came in last July. And so we had to, by a statute, we have a statute within our SSD charter, we have to look at how do we make sure we have all of our sub-districts that are similar. In this last census, we did see that some districts did decrease in population. So we had to address that. So the committee was 3 members who were community members within that live in St. Louis County, and then 3 superintendents. So we had those come together and we had the census committee. And in that we have redistricted some of our regional, won't affect our current SSD board members, but it will, it does switch some things around. For instance, Hazelwood and Jennings both had been together for many years. Their overall population did decrease significantly. So we needed to add in an additional district into Jennings and Hazelwood to kind of equalize them. We're trying to equalize most of the population between 140 to 146,000 individuals. And so we added in Maplewood, Richmond Heights will be moving into sub-district 1 with Hazelwood, Jennings. There is no area that has to, like, they have to be together or geographically together. So we want, it's more important to make sure that when our SSD school board members are representing equal amounts. And as you guys come in and you're voting, we can see that we have, we want to make sure that we have the similar votes. The other thing, 2 districts that we had to switch around in the sub-district was 6 and 7. And that was, we needed to decrease the overall population that was with Rockwood and Ladue. And we needed to increase the overall population that was the Clayton, Normandy, Rittner, University City. So we moved Ladue and Clayton around. So Clayton is now part of sub-district 7 and Ladue is part of sub-district 6. This is only in relation to our SSD board members and where they have to live to be able to represent each one of the sub-districts. This does not affect any of our current board members because all of them reside that are representing their current sub-districts. So I just wanted to give you all an update on that.
Could you repeat those changes again, please?
So the changes were Maple Red Richmond Heights is moving from sub-district 5 up to sub-district 1.
Okay.
Ladue is moving from sub-district 7 to sub-district 6.
Okay.
Clayton is moving from sub-district 6 to sub-district 7.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. In your packet, you could see that there is the map, that the current map that has all of the different representations.
Are there any other questions? Thank you. We'll move to item 6.03, strategic plan and comprehensive school improvement plan. I believe these were also included in the packet that was mailed out to you, and we will hear from Dr. Bolton.
I'm going to get us started off. Good evening, Governing Council. I'm Jennifer Henry, the Executive Director of Communications. Tonight, me and Dr. Molly Bolton will be sharing with you an update on the strategic plan and our CSIP. As I mentioned, it's to give you an update on our plan and our comprehensive school improvement plan. Next. Over the course of the past year, the district has been working with many stakeholder groups to develop our new mission and vision. And we have landed on support and empower students of all learning abilities to excel to their greatest potential. So we wanted to make sure that we had that emphasis on all learning abilities and making sure that they're reaching their greatest potential. We spent a lot of time making sure that this encompassed everything that we represent as a district, and kind of narrowed it down to make sure that we are not too lengthy in our mission, but make sure that we capture it correctly. And our vision is all students will realize their full potential in life and learning. Next. We developed our core values. If you remember our last strategic plan, we had quite a few more, and we have narrowed it down to 3: equity, commitment, and collaboration. And we are going to be able to incorporate many of the things that we previously had. So for instance, today, a question came up about workforce excellence, which was one of our previous areas. And that will fall under most likely all 3 of these, but depending on the topic, it could be collaboration, could be equity. So these things fit all areas of our organization. In the area of commitment, we will do everything we do revolves around our commitment to students and their success. Collaboration, we work with parents, students, partner districts, and the community to benefit students. And equity, every student, regardless of learning ability or socioeconomic status, deserves access to the services they need to succeed. Next. Then we developed our strategic priorities to align with those under our mission, vision, and our values. And we realigned these also into 3 areas. We will have our systems, which is our database approach to instruction, strategic approach to high needs, the alignment within our organization, the systemized approach to our facilities, and then the focus on recruitment, onboarding, and retention of staff. And then our resources, we're going to make sure that we are equitably distributing all resources, making sure that our organization and our community are aware of all of our resources, and then using them to our optimal ability. And our last one is relational communication. We're going to focus on relationships with external and internal stakeholders, focus on interdepartmental communications, and continue to build our family engagement. Next. So this strategy map explains how we got to the work that we did. So we focused on our goal areas, that I just mentioned on our last page. And underneath it are our strategies, and it takes us to our priorities and our ultimate goal of all students realizing their full potential in life and learning. Next. Now this graphic here explains the the difference between the strategic plan and CSIP. So on the left-hand side is our strategic plan, and on the right-hand side is our CSIP. We're one of the few organizations, school districts in particular, that have both. And our strategic plan focuses on our organizational goals, the direction of the organization, whereas our CSIP is more mission focused, and it's the roadmap to improve our student performance. So in general terms, strategic plan is about operation and direction of the district, and the roadmap to improve student performance, student learning is our CSIP. I know that there's been a lot of questions before about the difference between the two. Is there anything I can help answer right now? Okay, we'll move on. And then Dr. Molly Bolton will speak to how we incorporated the lens of equity into our strategic plan.
Thank you. So as Ms. Henry said, we have identified equity as one of our core values. So you have seen this graphic before if you've been with us. And so we just want to show how we use that lens of equity in everything we do. So equity is not a standalone goal any longer. Equity is embedded through all of our work. So you can see we take our information sources and we take those sources and we look through the lens of equity in order to develop our continuous school improvement plan. And then through that plan, we also have other improvement plans that align to that CSIP plan. And then again, using that lens of equity, we look at how that impacts student success. Next slide, please. So now I will take you through our CSIP goals and strategies. Next slide. So we did a thorough review of our data for our district, as well as research around what is successful for student achievement. Looking at our data and analyzing it and analyzing the research, we came up with 3 major goal areas. The first being proactively planning for student success. The second being making sure we align and coordinate our decision making to give students the supports they need to be successful that are consistent with that district mission. And thirdly, to create those learning environments and systems that are responsive to our students' needs, especially those students that have high mobility and their families and the staff who serve them. And Chief Officer Wendy Pendergrass will serve as the champion for all of the CSIP goal areas. Next slide, please. Within those 3 goal areas, you see under goal 1, we do have 3 strategies as well. So the first strategy, really focusing on our post-secondary or program outcomes and looking at what skills we need to be providing students to be prepared for those positive post-secondary outcomes. You'll see an asterisk by this one. This is a current CSIP goal under our CSIP plan that we are under right now, and we will be continuing that work and expanding that work for our next CSIP cycle. Our second strategy under goal 1 is looking at student data and those research-based factors that we know have a high impact on student achievement, and making sure we are proactively planning to support those connections so that our students have those positive post-secondary outcomes. And our third is collaborating and planning with our partners, and that could be partner districts, that could be agencies, that could be organizations, especially like in our CTE programs and our adult ed programs. Next slide, please. Goal 2 is looking at that decision making to provide those supports that are consistent with our mission. We do have 2 strategies under there. The first being developing a shared understanding of what programming should look like across teams, across districts, across service providers. And so this really gets to what our philosophy is about what programming should look like in special education. Again, utilizing that research, so we use the highest impact strategies. The second CSIP strategy is looking at those evidence-based practices that we use that we know yield high-level supports for our students that lead to that high achievement. You will also see an asterisk by this one. This is another CSIP strategy that is continuing, deepening the work and continuing with implementation. Next slide, please. Our final goal is about creating those learning environments and systems that really help support our students, especially our students that experience high mobility. So this CSIP strategy will be looking at providing that continuum of services and instruction for those students who will be experiencing school changes. We know that as SSD, we are one of the factors for equity that can really impact students' instruction, so that when they move from one school to another or one district to another, we can ensure that quality and continuum of services at a very high level for these students. And so we want to research and work with our partner districts to really be able to provide that consistency for those students and families who may not have consistency in other places in their lives. Next slide, please. And now we'll open it up to any questions that you might have.
I have a few questions, if that's okay. This is Debbie from Parkway.
Absolutely.
I'm going to start with what you just ended with. When you talk about the mobility, students changing schools, does this by any chance have any relationship to do at all with students who are suspended or even expelled, and their continuity of being able to meet their IEPs during that time that they are suspended? If they are in an out of school suspension, and how are we able to meet what their IEP needs are? Or is that even in our case, I see it as an issue that we're not able to, under our alternative education delivery system, when a student is out of school suspended, able to meet what those IEP needs are. And where does that put us at risk? And I don't even know if this goal is intended to address that issue or not, but nevertheless, it's a school change, albeit temporary for a short period of time, but it still has an impact on that student if they're not able to receive the services, because say they've got an 80-day suspension, we need to be able to provide that child with their proper needs during that period of time.
Absolutely. So the spirit of this goal is more about those students who are more mobile and moving between schools and districts. However, to address your point, yes, a suspension does cause an interruption in services. And so we do have mechanisms where we really try, be that through our homebound services, or if they are attending an alternative placement, as you suggested, we do provide services and those alternative placements. So we do strive to keep that continuum of services moving for that student.
Okay. My other question I guess this is at the very beginning on I'll stay with the CSIP for right now. What are the evidence-based strategies? So under goal 1, how are those identified? It sounds like those are currently in place, but where do you go looking for those? And are there any major changes that are being implemented to this to bring in better evidence-based strategies, or just kind of giving a little bit more detail on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the Council for Exceptional Children, which is a professional organization for special education, did some research that was federally funded through CEDAR, and they have 22 high leverage practices for special education. By high leverage practices, those are things that have been proven in research to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. So that becomes a key cornerstone to a lot of our professional learning for our staff, as well as those are practices that we are constantly monitoring implementation of and looking for the effect of implementation. We also then have evidence-based practices in many of our content areas, for example, in reading or in mathematics. So we do vet a lot of those strategies and programs so that we are ensuring that our staff has training and supports for those strategies that are shown to work. That means evidence-based and within the research. However, research is constantly coming out and changing. And so, we stay abreast of what the new research is showing us. If you watch the news, something might be deemed as a high leverage strategy or practice, and then more research comes out in future years, and it is deemed maybe not as good as some other things that have come out. So that is part of our process with this strategy, is to make sure we're staying on top of the research that's out there so that our staff is trained and can support those practices that research is continually showing to work for students with disabilities.
And staying within that same goal, under strategy 1.3, engaging collaborative planning with parents, are there changes that are being proposed to how that's currently being done? What is going to, what's going to happen to make anything different from what's currently happening there?
So I think you're talking about 1.3, engaging in proactive collaborative planning with partners.
Right.
So when we think of partners, we have a lot of partners. So we have families who are partners for student success. We have our partner school districts. We have our community partners as well. And so we just want to make sure that we are proactively planning with all of those groups to ensure, again, utilizing the best practices and strategies that we know are working in research, making sure our families are aware of those, making sure our partner districts are aware of those, and supporting them to put those pieces in place, as well as, as the community, especially when you think about our career and technical schools, a lot of times many of those the places where our students go to work, those industries, the industry standards may be changing as those jobs are changing and new technologies or new ways of completing those jobs become available. We want to be on the forefront of that. We want to be working with those partners to make sure we are preparing our students for what to expect when they leave us in the work world or in college, or whatever their outcome, their positive post-secondary outcome may be. So it's very important for us to collaborate with all of those folks to ensure we're preparing our students for life after school. I'm sorry, I think you're muted, Debbie.
Sorry, I am, thank you. My last question has to do with, I'm not finding it in my book, I had it tagged, but it has to do with post-graduation outcomes and getting information on that, because it sounds like that's something that we don't have a good handle on. Is that what the spirit of that particular goal is to get more follow-up on students that received SSD services with how they're doing after they're graduated from either a partner district or an SSD school?
I think that is, if you look at our state reports on post-secondary follow-up, we fall even a little bit higher than most of the rest of the state in being able to follow up with our students, but it's still not good enough. We fall at right around 33% of being able to follow up with our graduates and determine, their positive post-secondary placement or what placement they may have. And so, yes, we can always do better with that. And we will strive to do better. And that is part of the spirit of that strategy 1.1, when we're looking at making sure we're preparing those students for the skills they need, but then also, how are we going to know that? We're going to know that through being able to follow up with them and see where they are after graduation.
Mm-hmm. And I guess my follow-up question with that is, and then what? So once you find out how are they doing, maybe it's not meeting what their goals were, and now they're no longer part of the SSD system, you're just doing follow-up, then what happens with that information?
Then that helps us to inform our programming. Again, that's where we really have to have those collaborative relationships with our partners to ensure we understand the requirements that students need to have in order to be successful in those placements. So by following up and for kids that we feel should be successful, if they're not, then we have to investigate why, where did, what was missing there. And that could be, following up with those families, following up with that student, following up with those places of employment or those post-secondary institutions to find out what it is that we're missing that our students need to be successful.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to say, Molly and Jen, great job. I really look forward to sharing this with my district as we're finalizing our strategic plan. I thought it was a great example of not only the marketing piece, but very concise and tying all the things together. So I appreciate this and looking forward to the next 3 years ahead. I think it goes to 2025, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you for your great work on this.
Absolutely, thank you.
The question that I wanted to ask has a lot to do with solutions addressing the negative impacts of the mobility rate.
Yes.
So I guess my question here is there a breakdown? And I know that most districts are already trying to address this just with the gen ed population, but is there a breakdown that we would know approximately for our district, I would say with SSD, the number of students that are actually fall into this category versus the regular gen ed students, or is that all tied into one with the districts?
Typically, it's all tied into one. When the state or national statistics report out, it is they don't necessarily separate. Here are the students with special education that are affected versus students as a whole population.
Okay.
However, we are able to track some of that, and that is one of our goals for that strategy is to be able to look at that.
Bingo.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was getting ready to ask. Just how will we know how to see which one to really focus on? Well, we focus on all of them, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
What efforts? Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. We'll move to item 6.04, the FY23 budget update. We did have a presentation at our last meeting in March, so I think this one is just kind of updating any changes and whatnot. So Dr. Hug.
Thank you. Good evening, Governing Council. My name is Jeff Hogg. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Special School District. Next slide, please. And so again, yes, like what was just said, the purpose of this presentation will provide you just an update on the current budget, the process, how we got there, revenues, expenditures, and then additional staffing that we've requested. This budget was approved by the SSD Board of Education at our last meeting. And again, the budget committee established back in the fall guidelines for us to build this budget off of. And again, those 4 goals: equity, staffing, curricular support, and facilities. Next slide, please. And again, just to remind you, we do base our budget off of zero-based budgeting theory and practice. Basically, we look at our needs. That's what we would basically have to provide the curriculum. We look at our wants. That's currently what we offer. So we always want to make sure we keep that level of education. And then we look at enhancements. We always look at how we can make it better. That might be through speakers, field trips, anything like that. But again, we always want, through this zero-based, we always want the academics to drive the budget and never the other way around. As we've talked about too, we have 3 tiers of focus. One is all partner districts in our SSD schools. The others are our 11 districts who receive disproportionality money. And then we have 8 high needs districts that we provide extra support for as well. Next slide, please. And so you'll see here, these are our budget numbers for this year. These are our revenue numbers. Local, county, state, federal are the major sources of our revenue. And so while you see in that far right-hand column of budget FY23, you see a decrease, will actually increase from this current year. That 322 million you see for FY22 does not take into account the Blankenship ruling, which showed about $15 million shortfall in revenue this year. So that brought us down to about $308 million. So we're looking for an increase in local taxes. Next year's not an assessed valuation year. So we won't have a reassessment there. So we'll generally see between $2 and $3 million in increase in local revenue, which is taxes. Our county, which is fines, is going to stay the same. You see the major increase in state. That is due to the legislature fully funding transportation. So we went from about $6 million in transportation money to about 15.9 next year. One thing we'll really hope to push for with the state is that they continue to fully fund that. It would be great if they do. They're talking about it being one-time money, but we have a feeling that it could possibly stay, which would be really good for everyone involved. And then we have our federal dollars, and you'll see an increase of about $6.5–7 million, and that is due to an increase in Medicaid funding. The district has started with not only direct billing, but with cost settlement as well. And so we'll see an increase there. And then our contracted services and other revenues will remain the same. So we're projecting $489,375,434 for next year in revenue. Next slide, please. And then you'll see on this slide, this is our expenditure slide. So you'll see in that very last column, you'll see an increase in certified salaries. You'll see an increase in non-certified salaries. Those are both, we're both in our second year of negotiations. And so that will open up again next year. So our total salaries will be $314 million for next year. We show an increase in fringe benefits. When you increase salary, you have to increase PSRS or PEERS, which is retirement. But then we also have a 3% insurance increase in there as well. Purchase services will increase a little bit, and that's going to increase as we come off some of those pandemic years, the 2 pandemic years, and we start to see more travel and more speakers. And then supplies will increase a little bit next year as well. Capital outlay will decrease from that 27 million down to 19. That 27 million involves several projects of one-time spending. We were able to update bridges. We were able to update audiology to increase that because we had a little bit of extra money in our fund for after the last 2 years. So you'll see that total spending for FY23 is projected at $509,672,116. So we will deficit spend a little bit next year, but again, the board's approved that, and we have a plan for that deficit spending. Next slide, please. So as you'll see, one thing I wanted to make sure we touched on again is the additional staffing, not only for SSD schools, but for the partner districts. And you can see on the top part there that we're going to increase by 12 teachers, 23 paraprofessionals, and then 2 coordinators, 2 speech language pathologists, social worker, instructional coach, and a school psychologist. Those 42 positions are directly involving partner districts. And then we have additional staffing through special school district, assistant director of equity. We've hired 2 people for those positions. Human resource and benefits. We had a revamping of human resource this year. We have an assistant director of compliance, paraprofessional coach, translation coordinator, medical billing manager. That goes with the increased medical or Medicaid revenue that we were talking about, social worker and guidance counselor. And really, with the exception of the Medicaid billing manager and the guidance counselor that we added at one of our schools, all of those positions will directly or indirectly impact partner districts as well. It'll be with training, it'll be with support. So really, of the 54 positions, almost all of them directly impact our partner districts, which is great. Next slide, please. And you'll see on the screen, again, 54 positions at approximately 3.745 million. We've reduced 6 positions through attrition at about $475,000. Next slide, please. And that actually is just a quick review of the budget we had talked about at a prior meeting. Be more than happy to answer any questions.
This is Ruth Greco from Rittner. I was wondering, you said you're going to have deficit spending, but you have a plan.
Yes, so we know that with the reserves that we can and will continue to spend a little bit on that deficit side over the next several years. And as we do that, we'll continue to monitor. But right now we feel we're in a strong position where we can deficit spend to the benefit of our partner districts and our students.
Okay, so you think it's just 1 year, or you think it'll go beyond that?
Right now we'll project for a few years out, but we'll continually monitor and bring that back to you and the governing council as we go. But I would imagine we'll deficit spend for a few years.
Well, and Dr. Hogg, this is something that our reserve, the SSD reserve account has been very large for many, many years. And the board and I feel the governing council over the past few years has said this is too much and we need to do something about it. And so I think this is in response to that, those requests.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, Dr. Hogg. I have a question. Thank you for the report. Are there any items in the new CSIP or the strategic plan that will have a significant budgetary impact?
No, nothing along those lines that would be significant. Any increases that Dr. Bolton or any of the others have talked about have been accounted for in there already as we've moved through this year.
Thank you.
I'll ask a question somewhat related, but with transportation and bus driver shortages, other staff shortages, how are you feeling about being able to fill those positions? And do you feel that you have enough coverage within your budget to manage any additional expenses that you may need to cover all of the fill rates?
Yeah, so we can't begin to talk about how great of a job our transportation department did this past year. Starting with the director down through the drivers, monitors, aides. They really did a great job. Yes, we were understaffed, but we were understaffed where we didn't have sub and standby drivers. So we did have to combine some routes, but not too many, and we didn't have to cancel too many routes. So they really did a good job picking up. They really did a good job coming together as a group and making sure our students got to school. But that is something that we always monitor. We've changed a little bit about how we're advertising for those positions so that we can ensure we're staffed. It's something that our director of transportation and I talk about all the time. But right now we're sitting in it'd be ideal if we had those standby drivers, but they did a really good job this year where our students weren't impacted negatively, really covered, really picked up for each other. So yes, we could always use more drivers, as many of your districts could as well. But they did a great job, and we'll continue to plan for that coverage so our students can get to school.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And you'll have a chance for questions again when we approve the budget. So thank you, Dr. Hogg. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we will move on to our action items. Item 7.01, approval of the Comprehensive School Improvement Plan. We just had our presentation. Do you have anything else, Dr. Bolton?
I don't think so.
All right, then is there a motion to approve the Comprehensive School Improvement Plan as presented?
Patrick McKelvey. Oh, okay. Oh man, we're going at the same time. Patrick McKelvey, Melville.
And a second?
Veronica Morrow, Rio Riverview Gardens.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. Those in
I'm
favor,
sorry,
please.
Jen, I was on
Sorry.
mute. Sorry. Is this only the CSIP? I'm trying to look at our agenda. Or does it include the
Yes.
strategic plan with it?
Well, they're combined and
Okay, so it should it be the strategic plan and the CSIP?
well, I will say in board docs, it's written as just approval of the comprehensive school improvement plan, but you are correct. The attachments are both there. So Dr. Keenan, should I adjust the motion to have both worded in there?
Yeah, we only worded it for the CSIP because technically the governing council only has authority to approve the CSIP.
Okay, so then it's fine.
Yeah, they're separated, but they're working together. So that's why we just said we'll keep it clear and clean.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So under the Missouri statute, we are only required to approve the CSIP, and I'm assuming the board has approved the strategic plan or will approve it. Yes. Okay. So our motion was to approve the comprehensive school improvement plan as presented, and we had a first and a second. So we will move to our vote. Those in favor. Oh, any more questions? Sorry. All right. Those in favor say aye.
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 Any against say nay. Any abstentions? All right, motion passed to approve the comprehensive school improvement plan. Now we'll move to 7.02, approval of the FY23 budget adjustments. Oh, I'm sorry, the FY22 budget adjustments. Dr. Hogg, you have anything to say about those?
A lot of this is just moving money so that we're in compliance. And it's also the reduction of the revenue that we had in the beginning, but they do the blankenship ruling. We wanted to make sure we had all the revenue before we reduced it or did the budget adjustment. The only thing we really added was $69,000. 30 of that was for communications for annual recognitions. Now that we're back in person and we could do some of that, which was really cool. And then the remainder was for a grant that we received. So really a lot of it, there's a lot of numbers there, but it's a lot with just moving some money around to remain in compliance.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the FY22 budget adjustments?
So moved. Debbie Hopper, Parkway.
And a second?
Kenny Edgar, second. Kenny Edgar Afton.
Thank you. Are there any questions or discussion about the adjustments? Hearing none, we will move to our vote. Is all those in favor say aye.
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 And those against say nay. Any abstentions? Motion to approve the FY22 budget adjustments passes. And now for 7.03, the approval of the FY23 budget. Anything else, Dr. Hogg?
No, nothing other than the presentation.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the FY23 budget as presented?
So moved. Debbie Hopper, Parkway.
And a second?
Second, Rittner. Ruth Greco Rittner.
Any additional questions? We'll move to our vote. Those in favor say aye.
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 Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Motion to approve the FY23 budget passed. Item 8.01, our governing council orientation. Dr. Keenan.
Right, we are ready to walk all of the new members and existing members through the governing council orientation. We're going to divide this up into a couple of different people presenting. So I will start it out and then I'll move it into our board president, Dr. Cunha, will move into the next part. So next slide, please. So we're going to go over the history of our SSD, the origin of the governing council, how our board members are elected, talk about our SSD current board members and our SSD budget process. We'll talk a little bit more about the CSIP and strategic plan. We won't go too in depth with that because we've already approved that. And the scope of the SSD services. Next slide, please. So about SSD. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of our history. This is way back in the 1950s. So SSD was established in 1957. And so you can see, you know, we've come a long ways from this small little group of students. But it was something that really, I would say, was the the people who started this way back then in 1957 really did a great thing for our students and really accepted and really were forward thinking in terms of how to support special education students even before special education was a common practice within public schools. Next slide, please. Here you can see the kind of timeline of everything. I'll just highlight a couple of them. 1957 is when we started the services for special education. In 1966, they started to look at the overall for CTE. So that's when that came into, so about 10 years later. 1975 and 1976 are key legislative times for supporting students with disability. That was a national and federally regulated law that we had to require all students to receive FAPE. And so we really wanted to make sure that those are the key things that were highlighted. But as I said, SSD really was already ahead of the game in supporting and really fully funding special education across the county. Next slide, please. And so we put some key things together for all of you. So we are the 10th largest employer in the region, so in St. Louis area. Our revenue, as you saw, was $774 million, and our expenditures currently are at $459 million. We support over 286 buildings across the county, 25,000 students, and 510 square miles. Next slide, please. So here's another breakdown of our demographics of our students. So majority of our students are in the partner districts and in your district. So 20,200 are primarily in the partner districts. We support early childhood programming, but 1,400 of the students come to us for a partial day of career and technical education. We also do homebound services, support services for the private school students, and then we also have the court systems. So we have a wide variety of programming that we provide across the county. We also have 97% of the students attending their home district, which is what we want to continue to support that, and 59% are free and reduced lunch. You can see demographically, Caucasian students or white students are 47%, our African-American students or our Black students are 41%. So they're fairly closely together. So we want to make sure that we're supporting all of our students equally across the district. Next slide, please. So our staff, so we have about 236 administrative staff. We have 1,700 paraprofessionals. We have 2,700 teaching level staff. We have 470 operational staff, and then we have 477 other members, support members. We have 5 SSD schools, 2 technical schools, 265 partner district schools, and 22 partner districts. Next slide, please. So you can see here, we're going to go through the kind of like the map of it. So we have the St. Louis County. Next slide. These are the 22 districts. Next slide. This is where we have our SSD and our SSD special education schools and our SSD career and technical schools. Those are the yellow ones. One's north, which is North Tech. The yellow one in the south is South Tech. The 5 SSD special education schools, we have Northview and Ackerman in the north. In the middle, by the Ladue area, we have Litzinger and New Owner. And then on the south part, we have our Southview. Next slide, please. Here's all the additional 265 schools that we partner with and support we send special education staff into those partner district schools. Next slide, please. And now we're going to go into a brief explanation about the Governing Council. Next slide. So the Governing Council really has a couple of roles that are very distinct, and we want to make sure we kind of highlight those. And then we're going to go into the SSD Board of Education role. Next slide, please. So the roles and responsibilities of the Governing Council is, the first one is in March, you elect our SSD board members. You also approve and monitor the SSD annual budget, which you just approved. We also approved the long range rolling plan, which is currently the CSIP plan. And then you have to meet at least 4 times per year, which we currently do. Next slide, please. All right, we're going to go into the next portion of this, and then I'm going to hand it over to our current SSD Board of Education president, who is Dr. Cuneo. Dr. Cuneo? Did we lose him?
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Now, yeah, we can hear you.
Good. Thank you. I can see if I am at home, and I can guarantee you my wife would have loved to have had a button that could mute me most of the time. There's 7 members on SSD board. We have 3 appointments, much like every other board. Each board member represents one of the 7 districts. Interested candidates complete an application. Election is held during a public governing council meeting. A quorum of the 22 districts and a total population is required for the election. So in other words, to be elected, at least the candidate has to have at least 12 districts. And as of July 1st, 2022, they have to have a quorum. In other words, you have to add up the populations in those districts, and a quorum would be 503,139. Next slide, please. SSD is divided into 7 sub-districts. Earlier this evening, you had talked about the moving around. This is the current districts. Sub-district 1 is Hazelwood, Jennings, Maplewood, Richmond Heights. Sub-district 2, and that's what I represent, is Afton, Bayless, Hancock Place, and Melville. Sub-district 3 is Parkway. Sub-district 4 is Ferguson, Florissant, Pattonville, and Riverview Gardens. Sub-district 5 is Brentwood, Kirkwood, Lindbergh, Valley Park, and Webster Groves. Sub-district 6 is now, with the movement of Ladue, will be Ladue, Normandy, Ridner, and University City. Sub-district 7 is Clayton and Rockwood. Reason why that was moved, things were moved, as was said earlier, so that we could have roughly the same number, roughly the same population in all of the sub-districts. Next slide. Now, these are the traditional board policies, and it's much like any school board. Importantly, we set policy and strategic direction. We engage and connect with the community. We approve the district's strategic plan. We also hire and evaluate the superintendent. We just went through the evaluation of the superintendent for this year and approving the district's budget. So those are the 5 major goals of this board. And I believe those are the 5 major goals, board responsibilities for all school boards. Next slide. Now let me introduce you to the Board of Education. Next slide, please. I'm the current board president. I joined SSD in 2000. I'm the longest running member of our board. I'm also the oldest member of the board. As a Sub-District 2 representative, I serve Afton, Bayless, Hancock Place, and Melville. Professionally, I'm a clinical psychologist. I worked 24 years with the Department of Mental Health. I was the director at Illinois' Maximum Secure Hospital. I currently work as a court psychologist in all Southern Illinois, and I serve as an adjunct professor at SIU's med school. Next slide. Katie Partreff is let me introduce you to Katie. Katie's been with us since SSD. She's our vice president. She represents Parkway. Her community involvement includes serving as a school volunteer and a Girl Scout troop leader. Next slide. Next, we have Dr. Yuval Osner. Dr. Yuval Osner is a child psychiatrist. He was elected to SSD's board in 2020. and he represents Subdistrict 7, which includes Ladue and Rockwood. As Dr. Asner is a child and adolescent, they have psychologists, psychiatrists. He works in his medical practice at Mercy Clinic. He completed his residencies in psychiatry and child and adolescent psychiatry at Johns Hopkins, and is a member of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Next slide. Dr. Meredith Byers was elected to the SSD board in 2021. She represents Subdistrict 5. Dr. Byers is an anesthesiologist, and her subdistrict covers Brentwood, Kirkwood, Lindbergh, Maplewood Heights, Richmond Heights, Valley Park, Webster Grove school districts. Next slide. Curtis Faulkner was elected to the board in 2018. Curtis represents Subdistrict 1, which when Curtis was elected, and when I'm saying they weren't like these were when they were, each of these individuals were elected, these were their district, these were the school districts at the time. Hazelwood and Jennings school districts, his community involvement includes volunteering and serving on a variety of committees in the Hazelwood School District. Next slide, please. Next, we have Tiffany Hudson. Tiffany was elected to the SSD's Board of Education in 2021. She represents Subdistrict 6, which includes Normandy, Clayton, Ridner, and U City. She works as a communication consultant. She has experience in working in nonprofit communications and advocacy organizations. Next slide. Next, and finally, we have Scott Muller. Scott Muller was elected to the SSD's board last year, 2021. He represents Subdistrict 4, which includes Ferguson, Florissant, Pattonville, Riverview Gardens school districts. He's a social studies teacher at Parkway North High School. He's also served as an athletic coach and is a founding member of the Social Justice Action Committee at Parkway North. That's our board. Next slide. Now I would like you to turn it over to Dr. Hoffman with the SSD budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cuneo. Next slide, please. So we operate under the same 4 funds that you do at the partner districts. Operating fund, special revenue fund, that's the one that you pay the teachers out of. Many of you have a debt service fund, which is Fund 3. We don't, we just have a capital projects fund. And so that's where we fund our major projects out of. If you have a debt service fund or a Fund 3, that's where you set that extra levy to pay off your debt in the fall. But again, we don't have that. What we do is we do have specific account codes, just like you have, just like you see, to determine where money flows from, whether it is general, teacher fund, or capital projects funds. So next slide, please. And again, that general revenue and the teachers fund are used to pay for day-to-day operations of the district. The majority of those 2 funds are made up from local property as well as state and federal funding. And that pays for our salaries and our benefits, our instructional supplies, transportation, food service, and utilities. What those do not pay for is the building or renovating of schools. Next slide, please. And then your general and your teachers are your operating funds, and that gives you a really good idea of your primary indicator of the district's financial stability. So at a minimum, your balance flows throughout the year, and you want to be able to make sure you have enough in your account to fund through December without going into a negative balance. You receive the majority of your taxes in December and January. And if you're heavily driven with local revenue, like a lot of you are, that's what you want to base that on. You want to stay operable until you receive your tax payments. Next slide, please. And so then again, the capital projects fund, that's Fund 4 that you can build buildings, add on to buildings, remodel or reconstruct, pay for the furnishing of or purchase real estate. So we use Fund 4 for that. And again, a lot of you will drive Fund 3 to pay that. We used Fund 4. Next slide, please. And then just a breakdown of where our money comes from. Local, again, that's our taxes, 70%. State is 21%. And then our federal funding, that's Medicaid and Part B, will be 9%. I see those numbers changing a little bit this next year with fully funding your transportation and a little bit more of Medicaid. They'll change a little bit, but not a lot. Next slide, please. And then again, as I've said a couple of times, our local funds are our main sources, and those are our taxes. They include such things as fines, merchants, manufacturers, but really it's personal property and your assessed valuation. Those are the two major revenue buckets there. So our tax rate, where yours is set for your district, ours is set countywide. And then it may be adjusted in assessed valuation. And we set that rate every year by October 1st. Our operating tax next year is predicted to be $1.03. So we'll see a little bit of a drop in that as well. Next slide, please. So our state funds, much like you receive in your partner districts, this is the foundation formula that we receive from DESE on a monthly basis. Prop C is that half-cent sales tax. It's actually considered local funds, but it comes from DESE, so they'll see that on a monthly basis. Transportation, which we've talked about, and then your technical ed, early childhood, public placement, and then high needs. High needs is a revenue stream for students who are an expenditure to the district of 3 times that of a student who receives a regular amount of funds. So that is a reimbursement grant through DESE. Next slide, please. And then again, federal funds, we've talked about Medicaid, we've talked about Part B entitlement, that high needs fund is there again, early childhood, and then you have your Title I and other grants. Next slide, please. At this point, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Bolton.
Okay, and that brings us to our CSIP and strategic plan. Next slide, please. As we talked about before, and you just approved, was our comprehensive school improvement plan, which is our CSIP plan. Next slide. So this document, as we stated in our previous presentation, really helps guide us as a district to focus our efforts on becoming a better school district and supporting our students better. It is approved both by the Board of Education as well as the Governing Council. As you saw, it does align with our core values, our mission, and our vision statement as a district. And we do report quarterly to the Board of Education, and we have reported also to the Governing Council our progress on the CSIP plan each year. Next slide, please. Again, I just went through this graphic earlier, but just want to emphasize that we do use a lens of equity in all the work we do. So looking at our sources, looking at that through the lens of equity, then to develop our CSIP plan and our other improvement plans for the district, and then looking at our results of those plans through the lens of equity to ensure our student success. Next slide, please. Again, this graphic Ms. Henry went through to talk about the difference between the strategic plan, which really focuses around those organizational goals and our organization as a whole, including operations and instructional, and then our CSIP plan being more mission focused around that student achievement. Next slide, please. Again, our 3 goals for the CSIP is that proactive planning for successful student achievement, coordinating our decision-making and those partnerships to increase student growth and achievement, and then lastly, creating those learning environments and systems for those highly mobile students. Next slide, please. Our strategic plan, again, is focused around developing that mission, vision, and those 3 core values. Next slide, please. And that will lead us into our special education schools and programs.
Good evening, Wendy Pendergrass. I will go over all of our special education schools and programs. Next slide, please. So the scope of our services, as you had seen by the presentation with Dr. Keenan, we truly cover all of St. Louis County. We provide a variety of services that will be on the next slide. We support about 24,000 students. You have witnessed our 5 schools, our 2 technical high schools. We have about 34 vocational skills programs. We also provide educational support for our juvenile detention center in Clayton, and also a residential facility that is located at Mary Grove. We support all of our non-public education, which we call our Special Non-Public Access Program, or SNAP, for students that attend the parochial or private schools, or for those students that are homeschooled. We also provide homebound services for students primarily that are receiving some type of medical support, but also for those students that have discipline. We also support all of our programs, including deaf and hard of hearing, vision, and orthopedically and physically impaired. Next slide. We have a variety of additional services. If you have the opportunity to go over to Litzinger and see our new audiology wing that supports testing students all across St. Louis County, I would suggest you go. It's absolutely wonderful and state-of-the-art. We also have an adult education program that supports that also runs at the Met Center and will soon be moving to North Technical High School. We currently have a CNA and LPN program. We support all of the early childhood programs in our districts, in our 11 districts, but we also help support and collaborate with the coalition districts, those districts that run their own early childhood program. We have recently launched our combination of family engagement and our what used to be called PETA. It is now FACE. And that will be providing supports for our families across St. Louis County. Of course, we have assistive technology, our nursing program, instructional resources. We support Special Olympics throughout St. Louis County. And we have PBIS, but also mostly support the MTSS, which is multiple tiered system of support. Next slide. Partner districts, Ms. McRiddle.
Thank you. Next slide. So with our partnership, each of our 22 districts throughout St. Louis County, we have dedicated one director to support each partner district. Again, those focus areas are listed here, and these areas are specific to the partnership agreement in which I shared information previous in this meeting today. We also ensure that there is a focus on the family and community engagement. This was formerly PETA, and it now is a collaboration of both PETA as well as our family and community teams working collectively together. And how do we ensure that we have that engagement to take place within partner districts where FACE is able to support our families in providing resources, but also to ensure that we have those collaborative and feedback conversations with our PAC members in each of our school communities. Each of our partner districts, we have a dedicated partner district liaison, and here's where we establish those relationships that supports in decision-making. A lot of the things that we've discussed today through the partnership agreement, the CSIP plan, our parent advisory council, and the feedback and the requests that they have extended, this is where we really begin to have those deeper conversations and really focus on decision-making. And we definitely really allow the partnership agreement to support us with those conversations. We want to ensure through the partnership agreement, but on a consistent basis, that we have that collaboration to take place. We also ensure that we support our partner districts with understanding their roles and responsibilities as it relates to disproportionality. Next slide. We have provided to you the names of each of our directors in all 22 districts. This is an opportunity for you to connect directly with them. I've also provided my information as well as the Assistant Executive Director of Partner Districts, Dr. Yates' information. You're more than welcome to communicate with any of us to support with your needs specific to your partner district or in general to special school district itself. Next slide. Are there any questions?
May I ask, the public review committee wasn't cited in this. Is that something that should be part of our orientation?
The Public Review Committee is once every 4 years. We could add it in there, but it's once every 4 years that they come together.
I just think I think it would be nice if the new members are aware of it.
Yeah, that sounds good.
It seemed like the presentation had kind of been revamped from previous years. I appreciate that. A little more engaging. Anyone else have any questions? Then we will move on to 9.01, reorganization of the board. Every June, we elect new officers to the Governing Council. I will be stepping down this year as I've been elected president of Lindbergh Schools Board of Education. Prior to the meeting, we reached out to Governing Council members asking if they'd be willing to serve, and 3 people volunteered. So we will start with chair. Ms. Keisha Lee from Ladue is willing to serve as the chair of the Governing Council. Is there a motion to approve Keisha Lee as the 2022-2023 Governing Council chair?
This is Veronica Morrow Real. I'd like to make that motion.
Thank you. In a second.
Second, Kevin Martin, Ferg Floor.
All those are any questions, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Motion approved for Ms. Keisha Lee to serve as the Governing Council chair. We will move on to vice chair. Thank you. We'll move on to vice chair. Ms. Veronica Morrow Real from Riverview Gardens is willing to serve as vice chair. Is there a motion to approve Veronica Morrow Real as the 2022-2023 Governing Council vice chair?
I'll make that motion. Shannon Kohler Bayless.
And a second?
Second, Kenny Edgar Afton.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Thank you. And we will move, motion
Thank you,
approved for
everybody.
Ms. Veronica Morrow Real as vice chair.
Thank you, everybody.
So Mr. Kevin Martin from Ferguson Florissant is willing to serve as our recording secretary. Is there a motion to approve Kevin Martin as the 2022-2023 Governing Council recording secretary?
Parkway, so moved.
And a second?
Second, Ladue.
Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any against? Thank you. Motion approved for Mr. Kevin Martin as the Governing Council recording secretary. Thank you guys for serving and congratulations. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you for your
Congratulations.
service, Jennifer.
Oh, thanks.
Yes,
Thank you,
Jen,
Jennifer.
so much.
Thank you. So I will finish up the meeting, and at the next meeting, Ms. Lee will be running the show. I will still be attending as Lindbergh's appointee though. So 10.01 calendar of events. Those are included in board docs, and tentative agenda topics are also included for upcoming meetings. Does anyone have any questions? So we will move to item 11, announcements. The district does not have any. Do any governing council members have announcements?
Yeah. John Schler from Jennings has an announcement. This is my last meeting. I am moving in July in the Florissant area, and there'll be a new member doing the governing council next fall for Jennings. So
Thank you for letting us know.
yeah, I've done this for about 10 years. So
I want to say thank you for your service to your district. I know you've been at it a while.
yeah, but I'm still moving into the same sub-district that I'm in.
Oh, great.
In the Hazelwood School District over there where I'm moving to, so.
Okay.
But yeah, it's been a pleasure, and it's just getting a new chapter in my wife and I's life. So moving to a newer house. So
okay,
well, that's nice. Congratulations on your move.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Anyone else? All right. Well, then we will move to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So move. Parkway.
Second, Melville.
Second by Melville. I'm assuming we have no questions about that. But those in favor say aye.
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 And any against? All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Enjoy the rest until we meet again.
Have a great summer.
Have a great summer.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.